Video 2 is holistic scoring. The purpose of this second video is to review the philosophy of holistic scoring. As we begin this training session on the philosophy of holistic scoring, it is important to note that this information is not new. We have used holistic scoring rubrics in the past to score state math assessments. But in order to ensure consistency, it is important that anyone scoring student work understands how holistic scoring differs from grading classroom assessments. Holistic scoring assigns a single score to a response that reflects the overall level of understanding demonstrated. Holistic scoring does not assign points for parts and is not punitive, marking down for each individual error. The score assigned to a response indicates the level of understanding demonstrated by that response: thorough, partial, limited, or not sufficient for even limited understanding. When scoring holistically, read each response thoroughly to assess the level of understanding demonstrated. Assign the score that best reflects the level of understanding the response demonstrates. Keep in mind that some errors may detract from the level of understanding demonstrated and other errors may not detract. At this point, you may be wondering how you would know which errors detract from the level of understanding. To answer this question, you need to examine the guide papers. The scoring materials define how student work aligns to each level of the rubric for a specific question. When scoring, compare each student response to the guide and practice papers. The score assigned to the student response is based on the score assigned to the training paper it most closely matches, not on how it compares to the previous response or to your own standards. Guard against the danger of comparing the current student response you are scoring to the previous student response. Compare each response to the guide or practice set to determine its score. Doing otherwise will cause your scoring to drift. Scoring a state test is quite different from grading classroom papers. When scoring holistically, a response is assessed based on the demonstrated level of understanding and how it compares to the rubric and training papers. When grading classroom papers, individual errors are totaled to determine the percent correct. One purpose of grading in the classroom is to provide feedback on areas that need improvement so a student can work on those areas, as well as identify conceptual strengths. The purpose of scoring, on the other hand, is to assess a student's demonstrated level of understanding at a specific point in time. We will consider to what extent does the student demonstrate understanding of the skill or concept the question is measuring. This is seen by comparing the student's response to the guide papers. Teachers' grading policies differ across the state, but when it comes to scoring the state exam, a similar response should be assigned the same score across the state, whether it's scored in Fredonia, Buffalo, Albany, or New York City. Remembering that you are scoring, not grading, is essential. Although you may be experienced in reviewing student work, you need to set aside your own grading practices while scoring. Determine scores based only on the work in the student booklet, using state standards, not classroom standards, to score the student responses accurately, fairly, and consistently. It's important to remember that the quality of the handwriting, the use of cursive or printing, margins, editing marks, crossouts, and the overall neatness are not part of the scoring criteria. We also should be aware that the response length is not necessarily indicative of a high quality or a low quality response. Many factors can contribute to how long or how short a response appears to be, including size and style of the handwriting, spacing, or placement on the page. As we score, we need to follow the standards of the guide papers and rubric rather than being influenced by the length of the response. If the response fulfills the requirements defined by the guide for a specific score point, it should receive that score. As we go through the guide papers and practice sets, you will notice that there are some papers that really require the scorer to carefully examine the student's work to figure out where they started and how they worked through the problem. As you score papers, it is your responsibility to carefully examine such responses to determine whether the necessary steps and information are included. You may find that some students use methods that are not familiar to you as a scorer. When a student uses a unique, yet acceptable method to solve mathematical problems, they should receive the same credit as a student who has used a more traditional approach. We want to make sure that we objectively evaluate all approaches based on the scoring standards. Please don't hesitate to ask your table leader if you have questions about an unusual response. This concludes our video on the philosophy of holistic scoring. Next, we will take a look at the changes in the scoring policies and the overall process that items go through to become part of the test.